Barclays Bank has fired its chief executive, Anthony Jenkins, after less than 3 years in charge. It's understood that the board thought the pace of cost-cutting was too slow and that the bank's investment arm wasn't performing well enough. Mr. Jenkins is being replaced temporarily by the bank's new chairman. Here's our business editor, Kamal Ahmed. Now, and a century from batsman Joe Root rescued England on the first day of the Ashes in Cardiff. Australia had taken 3 early English wickets before Root's magnificent 134 steered England to a strong position. A short while ago, England were 319 for 6. From Cardiff, here's Joe Wilson. Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. A former SS guard at the Nazi death camp Auschwitz has been found guilty of facilitating the murder of 300,000 people. 94-year-old Oskar Gröning was known as the bookkeeper of Auschwitz. His job was to count the money confiscated from prisoners as they arrived at the camp. A court in Germany sentenced him to 4 years in prison at the end of what's expected to be one of the last Holocaust trials. Well, our correspondent Caroline Wyatt is in Lüneburg, where his trial took place. Caroline. Now, caught on camera by an unmanned NASA spacecraft that's travelled 3 billion miles to get there, this is the most detailed image ever seen of the planet Pluto. And there were celebrations at Mission Control this morning when the spacecraft sent a message to Earth telling scientists that it had survived its close encounter with the dwarf planet. Now scientists are waiting for even more detailed images of the last truly unexplored world in the solar system. Our science editor David Shukman is at Mission Control in Maryland. David. And good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. A former city trader has been jailed for 14 years for rigging a key interest rate used by bankers known as LIBOR. 35-year-old Tom Hayes is the first man to be jailed for the scandal which rocked financial markets. President Obama will tonight announce what he says is the most important step the United States has ever taken to combat climate change. His energy plans involve cutting the country's greenhouse gas emissions by a third within 15 years and relying more heavily on wind and solar power. But he faces stiff opposition, as our science editor David Shukman reports. Post-mortem has been carried out in southern Spain on the entertainer Cilla Black, who died at the weekend. She was 72. The results of the post-mortem were inconclusive, but police sources say her death was from natural causes. From Marbella, Robert Hall has sent this report. It's been confirmed tonight that the government has begun the process of selling the first part of its stake in RBS. The government bailed out the bank with £45 billion worth of taxpayers' money in 2008. The King of Saudi Arabia appears to have cut short his 3-week summer holiday in the south of France and headed to Morocco instead. And it's all because of a battle over a small beach. The stretch of sand in front of the King's villa is public, but it was shut off for his visit, much to the fury of locals. From Paris, Lucy Williamson reports. Barclays Bank has fired its chief executive, Anthony Jenkins, after less than 3 years in charge. It's understood that the board thought the pace of cost-cutting was too slow and that the bank's investment arm wasn't performing well enough. Mr. Jenkins is being replaced temporarily by the bank's new chairman. Here's our business editor, Kamal Ahmed. Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. 4 police forces in London, Jersey, Kent and Wiltshire are now examining allegations of child sex abuse involving the former Prime Minister Sir Edward Heath. This afternoon, Kent police became the latest to reveal they'd received a claim of a sexual assault committed in the 1960s. Meanwhile, BBC News has learnt that the prosecution of a brothel owner in Wiltshire in the 1990s was stopped after she claimed that Sir Edward was a client. Here's our Home Affairs correspondent June Kelly. A post-mortem has revealed that the entertainer Cilla Black died of a stroke after she fell and hit her head on Saturday. The 72-year-old had been sunbathing at her villa in Spain. Farmers have held protests at supermarkets in several parts of the UK of the price of milk. A year ago, they were paid nearly 32 pence for a litre of milk, but now they get just under 24 pence for a litre, according to the latest figures. Farmers say it costs them between 28 and 30p to produce a litre, which means their livelihoods are under threat. But the supermarkets insist they're not to blame. Claire Marshall reports from Cornwall. How much time and money should police forces be putting into tracking down missing people in Britain? More than 10,000 people were reported missing last year in Greater Manchester alone. Nearly half of them were children. Greater Manchester Police spent £30 million dealing with the problem. Now the Chief Constable, Sophie Raworth, is warning that the time and cost of tracking down people is an unsustainable burden. Our correspondent, Jeremy Cook, has been given special access to the team trying to find the missing. Britain's squadron of RAF Tornado jets, which is bombing so-called Islamic State targets in Iraq, is to be kept in service until at least March 2017, a year longer than planned. Today, the Defence Secretary, Michael Fallon, said that Tornadoes are needed to maintain crucial operational tempo. More details from our security correspondent, Frank Gardner. The last surviving Dam Busters pilot, Les Munro, has died at the age of 96. In May 1943, the flight lieutenant flew his Lancaster bomber on the legendary mission to destroy 3 dams deep in Nazi Germany. Les Munro was forced to turn back after his aircraft was hit. 133 aircrew took part in the raid. Almost half of them died. Danny Savage reports. There's been a big fall in the number of people doing sport at least once a week in England since the 2012 London Olympics. Now the government is asking the public for ideas on what more can be done to get people active. Here's our sports editor, Dan Roan.